Well, with us right now is Bert Baum. He is the board secretary on Third. Yesterday, Third had their regular monthly meeting, and Bert is with us to give us a wrap up. Good to see you, Bert. A lot of stuff was talked about yesterday in the form of some resolutions, and although you did not have a lot of resolutions in general, you had some that were fairly important, right?
Right, yeah.
And the first one you want to talk about is the lease policy. And
That's
I know
right.
one of the main things that was talked about here was, in fact, every year, do you want people to reapply with the lease, with the background checks and all that, right?
Right. That was raised. So what we decided to do is to table it for another month.
Mm-hmm.
But I have to tell you that this has been something that we have a task force.
Right.
It's called the Residency Policy and Compliance Task Force. We've been working for, I would say almost a year now. And this is one of the main policies that we've been looking at.
Right.
Because it turns out it really affects this community, even if you're not a landlord or a renter. And so what we wanted to do is establish a uniform, understandable policy and clarify just what the regulations are. And we've introduced a couple of new requirements, which we think will protect the community.
Mm-hmm.
That was really our driving force in this.
Right.
So if you, and I think this is important to understand, if you want to lease your manor, what that requires essentially is you're giving up your rights to that manor,
mm-hmm.
and you're transferring it to the lessee, the person who is leasing the manor from you. And to do that, you have to surrender your ID card, and you get another ID card which just permits you to visit your manor to make sure if you want to check up on how things are going. But you're also surrendering your rights to any amenities. So unfortunately, what we've been finding is people would lease their manor but still come into the community and use our amenities,
mm-hmm.
play golf. And we felt this was not right. So this is one thing we want to caution people about. The other thing that, and this has been an ongoing standard here, is you cannot lease your room. You can lease the whole manor, but not rooms. So we're not in the room renting business. We don't want to encourage that, and that's a violation. We don't encourage you renting through VRBO either,
mm-hmm.
or any of these sites. So that's spelled out in our application. So what we're requiring now is that every year you would have to renew, or initially you would have a year application, which would be good for 1 year,
mm-hmm.
and every year it would be renewed. Now what we're also requiring is that the lessee produces, or obviously the landlord could produce, a criminal background check and a credit score.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now there were some questions raised about, do we have to do this every year? And I went back actually and looked at our notes and spoke to some of the people involved, and our feeling was at that point that yes, we want to initially do this every year. And it turns out that getting a background check, a criminal background check, is not really that expensive. And we can give you the names of agencies that do that
mm-hmm.
for something like $20, $20 to $30, and you get an instant reply. It doesn't take weeks. I think you can get an answer within a day. And what we plan to do actually is contact people who are leasing now and provide them with this kind of information.
Okay.
And I'm glad to have an opportunity to come on this program, because one of the questions that was brought up was, nobody knows about this. Well, we're trying to let people know what's going to happen. So at the end of the lease period, then the member has to get the ID cards, passes, etc., that was given to the renter. And if he doesn't do that, then he has to pay a fine. And the other thing to remember, and this is related, but it's not really part of this program, is that if you invite a guest here, you can only do that for 60 days.
Okay.
60 days for the whole year. And we know that that's been abused. And the other thing is, we don't allow any businesses or commercial ventures. And when you have a lease, you're only allowed to have as many full-time occupants in the manor as your bedroom plus one. So if you have a one-bedroom manor, you can have 2 people.
Right.
Okay? And we find that in the past, that's been abused. So there will be circumstances where there'll be some hardships. We will recognize that, and the board always has the option to waive some of the requirements. So the object of this is not to make things tougher for our residents, harder. The thing is to bring about a uniform policy where we have a better feeling for who's renting and a better control over the situation.
Okay, let me ask you something on, you said every year to renew. Now, the owner, even though they have a lessee in there, the owner is the one that pays the monthly assessment, right? The renter pays.
He still pays the assessment.
Okay, so the fact that every year you're asking that the lessee does a credit check, am I right?
Yeah, well, it probably
that would
the
affect more
landlord.
the owner. Okay.
Yeah, probably the landlord would do that.
Right, and it's more for their benefit because they're paying no matter what.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And the other thing, I'm glad you brought that up, that we need to stress is that the landlord is responsible for the renter's behavior.
Right, exactly.
And we make sure that the renter is aware of our policies. But if he does break it, and this has happened, and it's been a real issue, then the member is responsible for what's happening. And he can be fined. He can be
right. Yeah,
brought to justice, let's put it that way.
Okay.
So we'll bring this back for our next meeting, and we feel that at that point we will have ironed out any questions, and we hope to have this then become part of our policy.
Okay.
Okay?
All right, and moving on.
Well, let's talk about drones.
Yes.
That's another policy. A lot of people want to fly drones. Right. There are businesses that want to fly drones here, the Video Club, the Thrive Project, and realtors actually, to give you an overview of the community. So in order to have this, we've established a drone policy, and this policy actually has to be approved by all the boards. GRF has approved it. We're looking at it. United is looking at it. Actually, this policy started, I was a member of the Community Activities Committee. That's a GRF committee, and it first came to them. It was decided to give it to the GRF board and to their security committee. And so this is where we're at with that.
Okay.
People have to realize that you just can't go out and buy a drone. You have to have it registered with the FAA. And we would require that. We require that you obtain a permit, and you can obtain it from any of the mutuals or GRF, and that the person who operates the drone has to be 18 years old at least, and also have $1 million worth of insurance. So this is not a trivial matter. And once they have the permit, they don't have to go back for it, but they have to present a flight plan so we know what they're going to do for that flight, okay? So I think this is important. And people say, well, we don't need drones, and this was brought up, and it's the same issue. We don't need automobiles. We don't need anything new. So rather than try to prevent it,
Right.
let's make sure that it's done in an orderly fashion.
Okay. Now, if somebody's interested in this, you know, you mentioned the FAA, and
Right.
I think my understanding is if the drone is under a certain weight, you don't need to register with the FAA. I think it's under a half pound or something like that.
Well,
right?
it's spelled out here,
Right,
what
okay.
the weights are. So
Okay.
if there's some question, I'm sure that can be answered for them
Okay.
if they go to resident services.
Okay. Very
Okay,
good.
so there were some questions raised about this. One of our board members got a little upset because in the policy it said you can fly it up to 100 miles an hour. So I think
Yeah, I don't know
that's
about
just
that.
written,
Yeah.
that's an upper limit. So we're getting more information on that, and we've tabled that until our next
Okay.
meeting in April. The other thing that we're looking at is collection lien enforcement policy. We want to update that. This is a policy that will cover assessments, fines, fees, and chargeable services. And what we want to make sure is that these are paid in time. And there's been a problem with that too. So just a reminder, you have to pay your assessments in 15 days. And if you don't, there's a late fee.
Okay.
And the late fee for that is $20. But if you continue not to do it, it can go all the way up to foreclosure. So
Okay.
we have a lot of steps that happen along the way, but it can ultimately lead to that. And unfortunately, we've been actually very lucky in this community. We have a very low failure rate of people not wanting to pay or not willing to pay their assessments. I think compared to other HOAs, we're doing very well in that regard. But over the years, that money piles up. We have
Right.
something like over $300,000. This may cover a 10-year period
Right.
in fees that haven't been collected. And the other thing we did, we amended the version and we passed it. And we also said that there will be a late fee for fees, fines, commercial services, and that will be $35. And I just want to point out, we had a report from our finance committee. We're certainly operating very well. It's early, it's just the first month, but we have a surplus of $379,000 in our operating fund, and our reserves, we had $769,000 that we were able to add, but that figure will vary. Another thing that's going to affect the community is the red curbs. We looked at two aspects of it during the meeting. One we call red curb request, and this gets a little confusing.
Yeah, right.
And then there's red curb reset. So let me explain that.
Sure.
People don't want other people parking in front of their manor, and they request a red curb. Well, we decided that has to be done in a more orderly and reasonable fashion. So if you want to have a red curb, you have to submit a request to the staff. But that will only be done for fire or safety purposes.
Okay.
Now, we have a red curb reset. Where did that come from? What does that mean? We had a parking study that was done here by Urban Crossroads. We need more parking space in Third. There's no doubt about it. And what this would do is we will eliminate unnecessary red lines in the third. And this should create 500 more parking
Oh, wow.
spaces.
Okay.
So the red curbs are not only there for the fire department. If they're there for fire department or real safety
Right.
considerations, they'll remain. If not, we're going to eliminate them. And our staff now is looking at what's this going to cost us and where it's most needed, the locations. And they should get back to us, and then we will move ahead with this program. So that sounds pretty exciting. And the other thing I'd like to talk about is the heater element and the water heater element replacement, okay? Well, what does this mean? Well, what our energy committee has discovered is that over time, there's a buildup in residue on the elements in your water heater
Right.
because we use hard water, okay? And this really cuts down on the efficiency of your water heater, and it costs you more in electricity costs. So what we can do is provide a service, and that's what we're going to do, where we come in and we look at your elements, inspect them, we drain your tank, and if in fact the elements are really coated, they can be replaced. And this will be a chargeable service, so there will be different steps in this depending on what's required and at different times. So what our construction M&C people tell us that optimally it should be done every 2 years, but this would be up to the resident to decide, okay? So they can just come in, drain it, and look at your elements. If need be, they can replace the elements. And this is all going to be done as a chargeable service, and the cost will be for the material, the labor, and that means the time, how long it's going to take, and the service charge. The service charge is $25. This was a question
Right.
that came up too. So the service charge will be $25, and what we want to do is really give the community an opportunity to have more chargeable services. At one time, there were quite a few. They've been cut back. We want to reinstitute some of them that are really valuable to the community.
Okay, very good.
Okay?
And one of the reasons that these become valuable, it makes it easier for people if they need something in
Right.
their home
There's a whole list
that
of
can be
chargeable
easily done without
services.
calling an outside service. And-
Right.
yeah, exactly.
So there's a whole list, and you can get it on the first floor in the community center in our residency services.
Right.
They'll be happy to show it to you, but we want to provide more of a service to the people. And I just want to end on the solar.
Sure.
Okay, where does that stand? As you know, we are putting up these solar panels on the 3-story buildings, which will help pay for the common electricity, the electricity that third residents pay through their assessments for the common area. The program involves putting up 12 of these. We've gotten 9 now that are operating. The 9th is just about to be given the okay by the electric company. We'll be able to do that. We'll have 9 of the 12. We're working on the other 3. We have some problems there, but we think we have a way to solve that. So we'll have all 12 operating, and this will give us a significant reduction in our electricity costs.
Right, very good.
Okay?
All right, Bert, thank you for coming in.
You're welcome.
I
Nice to
appreciate
see
that.
you.
And we'll replay that meeting for you tomorrow at 1:30 on Channel 6.
Thank
See you
you.
again. We'll be right back.